Hi Blender heads! I have been very busy with real work lately, but I did get to create some nice product visualizations for a client, and I thought, why not make a video and share some tips for that line of work. So in this video I will talk a little bit about product lighting, and together we will create this kind of product shot, perfect for an online shop like Amazon. Okay, so for this video I will be using this very simple scene here that I just created a few days ago for a client. Let's look around quick. We just have a ground plane that doesn't even have a material yet. We have the camera with this square image, and then I have this spray bottle here that I modeled out of a cylinder, and then I put on a sticker here. And then we have this piece here and the spray top. And then I also have a clear cap over top, but we will be looking at that a little later. Right now I don't have any lights in this scene, and all I really have is a gray world color, and that gives me this image. By the way, I'm in Cycles here. And you can see that this looks very flat, very boring. And of course, in order to show the shape of our product that we want to visualize, we have to do that with lights, just like in product photography. A common lighting setup is the 3-point lighting, but that is usually used for portraits. And for product photography or product visualization in 3D, we need many more than just 3 lights. Anyway, I'm gonna still keep it very simple here, and I think the final thing is just gonna have like 6 or 7 lights. Well, you'll see. First of all, let me turn off the world. Maybe just a little dark gray setting here. And the first light I'm gonna switch on is my top light here, which is this thing. And we can already see that this gives us a rather diffuse light all over our scene. But because we have a light source now and not just the entire world lighting up, we already can see the shape of our spray bottle here. Now it looks much more three-dimensional than with just the world light. Let me switch back quick. So here we can hardly tell that this is a cylinder. It has no shape, no three-dimensionality, no depth to it. And that's why we need lights. By the way, I see many cool products on Facebook groups or online where people spend hours and days modeling some sort of like technical gadget or device or something. And then for their final render, they just slap on an HDRI environment light in here and hit render, and then they post that. And it usually looks pretty much like this. So very boring, very flat. No specular highlights, no reflections. You can't tell the shape. So my advice is, after you spend hours and hours or days or weeks modeling whatever you try to visualize, you should spend 10 or 15 minutes on lighting, because really that's all it takes, and you will see. So take away our environment light and play with the lamp. So this is our first light. Now we could do completely without this, but I like to have it in here just so I have, if all other lights are off, I can still see what's happening. And it also gives us our first nice highlight here, reflection from this light. And it gives us a very uniform light across the ground plane here. Now, the more important lights, or maybe the most important lights for products, are the lights that are placed behind our product. So on the opposite side of the camera, backlights or rim lights. And I have one here, backlight left. And you can already see this brings in a lot of light And most importantly, it gives me this very nice highlight all the way down here. And that's really what I'm looking for, because this adds not only depth and 3D, three-dimensionality to this object that I want to visualize, but also it shows that this is a glossy material here. So we have this glossy white plastic, and this is a glossy sticker because the reflection is visible all the way down here. Now this is this light here, rather big area light, a rectangle with the rather high strength on the left, and then I have another one on the right over here, giving me this reflection here. This one is a little wider and it has less power, so we have a little bit of a difference between this highlight and this highlight, but of course you can play with this a lot. Now those aren't really rim lights, they're not really placed back here, they're more off to the sides, but that's what I decided to go for this product visualization. Let's quickly look at some of the reasons behind this. By having the lights off to the side like this, we end up with these highlights, which in turn leaves a darker rim around here. And also here. It's not really dark on this side, but it's darker than the background. So for this high key shot with a white background, having sort of a darker area, a darker edge, shows more of the overall shape of this product. Now if we went for a dark background, then moving the lights over more behind the object actually moves the reflection back all the way to the outer edge, as you can see here. And this would be more of a rim light setup for a darker background, especially if, for example, the object that you want to visualize is also dark. Now these rim lights show the outer edges of the product and make the shape visible, compared to if we move it over here, you can see we have the reflection here, but now we can't really tell where the edge is. So placing those backlights or rim lights, depending on your entire image, your entire scene, is really important. So we already have 3 lights in our scene, just to get some reflections and highlights on the product. Now let me just talk about this quick. I have this collection here I called Studio. And the Studio contains the ground plane, this top light, the backlight left and right, and also the backdrop that I'm going to switch on later. Why did I put this in the Studio? Because I have to visualize several different products here, and I want to have a uniform Studio setup that I keep using for all of the different products. And then in here, where we have the spray bottle, in here I have more lights, and those lights are just for this product, so for the spray bottle here. Now if I have a different product in my actual scene for my client, I had several collections here for different types of products. And for this one here, for the spray bottle, I have this light, which is my key light, shining onto the bottle, and that gives me not only this very bright light here, but also a reflection here. And then I also added this point light over here, this one, and that one is just in the scene for this reflection here. So I moved it on the Z-axis to be in this spot here, where it goes across not only the plastic but also the sticker. So that's what that is for. And it's in this group here because these 2 lights belong to this bottle. Okay. Now for the backdrop, my goal is to create a very clean, very high key, basically perfectly white image. And if I switch off the ground and switch off this backdrop here, this is this mesh, this is a rectangle, and it has this material assigned to it. So this is not an area light, this is a real object with an emission shader, and we can turn the emission up to like 1.1, something like this. 1.1 is good. And that gives me this very clean, almost perfectly white background. It's more like a light gray, which is good because then the highlights on the product pop even more. But of course, this is not what I want. Sometimes on Amazon you see products like this where they're just floating on a white background. Amazon, I think they tell you or they require you to have the main product image to be on white, but we can do a main product image on white that looks much better because we need a ground plane for that. We do want some shadow here, we do want maybe some reflections in the ground plane. Without the ground plane it just looks weird, this floating in space kind of spray bottle. Okay, so I do want a ground plane, and I'm going to create a new material for this ground plane. I'm going to turn down the roughness a little. And also what I did for the final stage setup, this light over here, you see the product has blue and green in it. So for this left backlight or rim light, I turned that blue, and the right one I turned green. And now we can also see that we have the light on this ground plane here, which really makes the transition here between our back plane, our backdrop, and the ground plane very visible, because this is not white anymore now. And this is really something I want to improve. And I'm going to show you a little trick just with the ground plane material here, how we can fade the ground plane into the white backdrop seamlessly, but still we keep the shadows here, we keep reflections here, so that we don't have this weird floating in space effect. We still have a ground plane and some contrast here. So how do we do that? Well, what I want to do is I want this ground plane to be transparent in the back here, and really just this material, this principled material, in the front. And we can do that by, first of all, adding a transparent shader and mixing that in. And now we have this mix factor. Here we have 100% ground plane material, and here we have 100% transparent material, so we have this floating effect. And now we use this mix factor here to make it fade out in the back, or fade to transparent in the back. So input, we take the geometry, we take the position, we separate x, y, z of the position, and now the y, because the y is going from front to back, the y gives us our factor. So if we look at this from the side now, this already looks pretty good, I think. If we take this as the factor for the mix, we can see that the ground plane becomes transparent in the back here. Okay, so looking at this, if this is not perfectly usable for you, if you want to move this gradient or maybe resize it, you can always add a math node, set this to multiply, So if you set it to multiply and a value lower than 1, so like 1.75, then you get more of a gradient. Okay. If you set it to 2, you get a sharper transition. I think I'm just going to leave it at 1. And if you want to move it back and forth, where the gradient is, where you want to start fading out to transparent, then of course you can also add another math node set to add. And now with this, you can basically slide it from front to back. So let me just put it like in the back here. So we still have ground plane here, and then here we start fading to transparent. Let's plug that in here and look at our finished material, and you can already tell that this is working nicely. And if we look through the camera, we don't have this sharp edge anymore. Maybe I want to have an even sharper transition here. And move it here. So I want, looking at the factor here, I want this to be perfectly white here, so it's really 100% transparent. Oh, what does this look like? Now we have 0 visible edge here. Now this looks much nicer, I think. Let's compare. This is sort of, it gives us this feeling of a stage or a studio or a room. If you're visualizing a car or something, maybe then you would actually want this to show the viewer that there is a room. But for this product, for let's say our online shop, I think this looks much nicer. We do have shadows, we do have reflections. It's not floating in air, but we have this super cool transition to a very clean background. Okay, so that's the pure white seamless backdrop done. Now just for fun, let's see what we could do if we wanted this to be a pure black background. So I'm just gonna hide the backdrop, and since the world is set to black, this is already black. Now the ground plane, I'm gonna just add a new principled shader, set it to 100% metallic, and look at this. So now we have nice reflections here. Okay, and if we use that in here, we also get this fade to black back here, which looks much nicer than this sharp edge of our ground plane here. By the way, looking at this black image here, if you had this light moved over here for a better rim light on the product, you get this nasty reflection in the ground plane. And I have a video on my channel you might want to check out, how to remove this nasty reflection but still keep the rim light of our green light. So I will also link to that in the description or the info card on top here. So let me just undo this. Also, looking at this reminds me of a couple of videos I made for reflection catchers. So if you're interested in how to get a transparent PNG where all of this is transparent and including this reflection with nice transparent transitions, then I also have a video for that. Actually, 2 videos on my channel, one for cycles and one for Eevee. If you're interested in that, go check it out. Okay, now I just go back to my white. So this was the black. My white high key product shot. Okay, so we have the lighting done. How many lights do we have now? This is a light. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lights. This is still pretty good. If you do more product visualization, or if you have a more complex object where you really need to place lights to show certain materials, surfaces, maybe buttons or displays or whatever, you might end up with way more than just 6 lights. Okay, so this is the lighting setup done. This trick here with the ground plane fading into the backdrop. Of course, for whatever your product you try to visualize, you will place different lights in different positions, and maybe have even more or maybe less lights. If you do want to add an environment texture, sometimes they can look really nice. For example, if you do stuff like cars, then my advice would be to go into the node editor here, turn your environment texture into black and white, and then come down here and just show it in the glossy reflections. So you turn off camera and all of that, and you just show the environment texture in the glossy reflections, so you get nice reflections on your product. But for the actual lighting, I think that carefully placing real lights in the scene makes for a much nicer product visualization. Also, one thing you can consider here. So if I were to duplicate this light to get, I don't know, another reflection here, second one, but I don't want this light to actually be lighting my scene or to cast shadows. I just want this light to show up, to show this highlight here on my bottle. Then I can go in to the settings here and also switch off all of these checkboxes here and just have the light show up. Oh, I'm in the wrong tab. I want to be in here. So these are the settings for this point light. Just switch it off here and only show glossy. So we get this glossy reflection. And in the light settings, we can even switch off cast shadows. So this light basically does nothing to the scene. It only shows up in the reflections. Okay, so if you create a cool model of any kind, then please throw some lights around, and especially behind your model. Even if you use an HDR light, you can still add some point lights or spotlights or area lights to create highlights and shadows. Here is my little spray bottle lit only with an HDRI compared to the studio lighting setup we created in this video. Let me know in the comments below which one you think works better as the main product image for an online shop. As you saw in this video, it is really easy to place and play with lights in Blender, and thanks to some more advanced features of cycles, we can even make certain lights, and even the environment light, if we do use one, show up only in the reflections for a perfectly lit final result. After all, the main goal of product photography or 3D product visualization is to make the product look as good as possible while keeping the scene as clean as possible to keep the focus and attention of the viewer on the product. In the next video, we will take a closer look at the opaque and plastic materials of this spray bottle and how we can add more contrast back into this otherwise very bright image. Thanks for watching. Chris P out.